Hello, my fellow Canon Knife family, creepypasta lovers, and all newcomers. Tonight, I give you part 1 of the Encounters of WiseBorn. I hope you enjoy. I've always lived out in the middle of nowhere. I chose this life after the military, craving the peace and quiet that only isolation could bring. The land was cheap, the air was clean, and the creatures, well, they were a different story. I remember my first encounter with one of them vividly. It was late in the evening, and I was working in my greenhouse, tending to my tomatoes. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across my property. That's when I saw it. A medium-height creature, maybe 5.5 feet tall, emerged from the tree line. It moved slowly, almost deliberately, as if it was trying to be sneaky but wasn't quite sure how to pull it off. It had this odd, lumpy body covered in patchy fur and large, bulbous eyes that seemed too big for its head. I watched it for a while, not sure what to make of it. I kept working, keeping an eye on the thing as it approached. It didn't seem dangerous, just weird. I had a carrot in my hand, fresh from the garden, and was about to take a bite when I noticed the creature had stopped dead in its tracks. The creature was staring at me, or more accurately, at the carrot. Its eyes grew impossibly wide, and it let out a shrill, high-pitched noise. I didn't get scared easily, but I was definitely intrigued. The creature looked panicked, and for some reason, I decided to wave the carrot at it. Its reaction was immediate and almost comical. It started to back away, still walking slowly but speaking in a hurried, almost frantic whisper. Go, run, we gotta get away. He's got the orange thing, it said, its voice high and shaky. I couldn't help but laugh. The creature turned and ambled back toward the trees, muttering to itself the whole way. He's gonna get us with that pointy thing. Run faster. Oh no, he's gonna eat it. I watched it disappear into the woods, shaking my head in disbelief. What kind of creature is afraid of a carrot? I decided to call it Carrot Eyes for obvious reasons. It wasn't the last I'd seen of it, but it certainly was one of the more memorable first encounters. As the days turned into weeks, I had more run-ins with Carrot Eyes. It almost seemed to be concocting some ridiculous plan to trap me, but its methods were laughably inept. One time, it tried to lure me into a pit it had covered with leaves, but the thing was so shallow I'd have to trip on purpose to fall into it. Another time, it dangled a rope from a tree, as if I'd be stupid enough to walk into the obvious snare. Each time I thwarted its plans with minimal effort, it would retreat with the same hurried mutterings. Go, run, he's too smart, abort mission. Carrot Eyes became a regular fixture of my evenings. It never posed a real threat, just a mild inconvenience, and a source of amusement. I started keeping a spare carrot in my pocket, just in case I needed to shoo it away. Life in the middle of nowhere wasn't lonely, with these odd creatures around. They added a strange kind of charm to the place, and as the days went by, I found myself looking forward to my encounters with them. But Carrot Eyes was just the beginning. There were others out there, some dumb, some smart, some truly terrifying, and some hilariously bad at being scary. And I was ready to meet them all, one bizarre encounter at a time. One evening, as the sun was setting and casting a golden hue over the landscape, I decided to take a walk around the perimeter of my property. I enjoyed these evening strolls. They were a way to unwind after days of work and to keep an eye on any new developments in the ever-changing landscape of my secluded home. As I walked along the path that skirted the edge of the forest, I noticed something unusual. A small patch of ground ahead of me was trembling slightly, as if something underneath was trying to break through. I stopped and watched, curious to see what new oddity would emerge. A small, dirt-covered hand appeared first, followed by another. Slowly, a young boy pulled himself up from the ground. He was small, maybe 10 years old, with a brown paper bag over his head. The bags had 2 holes cut out for his eyes, which shone with a strange, unsettling brightness. A crooked, uneasy grin spread across his face as he stood up fully and dusted himself off.
Wanna play a game?
He asked, his voice high and slightly sing-songy, but there was an edge to it that made me wary. I looked at him for a moment, considering my options. He didn't seem dangerous, just off. No thanks, I said, keeping my tone neutral. The boy's grin never faltered. He simply backed up, still facing me, and disappeared back into the hole he had come from. The ground closed up behind him as if he had never been there. I shook my head, wondering what that was all about, and continued my walk. Over the next few days, the boy popped up regularly, always from a different spot, but his routine never changed. He'd pull himself out of the ground, smile that unsettling grin, and ask, "Wanna play a game?" Each time I'd refuse and he'd back away, disappearing into the ground again. The encounters became a minor annoyance. I found myself avoiding certain areas he would be in or he was likely to appear, but he always found a new spot to emerge from. I started calling him Bag Boy, for lack of a better name. He didn't scare me. If anything, he was just another strange fixture of my life out here. One night, I was fishing at the lake. Bag Boy appeared on the shore, grinning as always. The moonlight cast an eerie glow over his paper bag mask, making his eyes shine even brighter.
Wanna play a game?
He asked, his voice carrying over the still water. No, I replied, not even looking up from my fishing line. Bag Boy backed up, still smiling, and slipped into the ground as usual. I let out a sigh, reeling in my line, and decided to call it a night. As I packed up my gear, I wondered if Bag Boy would ever take the hint. But then again, if he did, things might get boring around here. Despite the oddities and annoyances, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of companionship with the creatures. They were like bizarre little neighbors, each with their own quirks and routines, and as long as they didn't cause any real harm, I was content to let them be. Life in the middle of nowhere had become a series of bizarre yet oddly predictable encounters. Carrot Eyes and Bag Boy had become familiar nuances, almost like the eccentric characters in a long-running play. But not all creatures were content with simple scares or harmless games. Some, I would soon learn, had a more sinister intent. It was a brisk autumn afternoon when I first encountered something truly challenging. I was out chopping wood near the edge of my property, getting ready for the colder months ahead. The rhythmic sound of my axe splitting logs was interrupted by an unusual noise, a deep, resonant groan that seemed to emanate from one of the old oak trees nearby. I paused, wiping the sweat from my brow, and turned to face the tree. It stood tall and imposing, its gnarled branches swaying gently in the wind. As I watched, a fissure appeared in the bark, widening into a dark, yawning gap. From this crevice emerged a creature unlike any I had seen before. It was tall, nearly 7 feet, with a sinewy, almost skeletal frame. Its skin was a mottled gray-green, blending seamlessly with the bark of the tree it had emerged from. Long, clawed fingers flexed menacingly at its sides, and its eyes glowed a malevolent yellow. A low, guttural growl rumbled from its throat as it stepped forward, its movements unnervingly fluid. I dropped my axe and reached for the hunting knife strapped to my belt, my instincts kicking in from years of military training. This wasn't a creature I could scare off with a carrot or a simple refusal. This one meant business. The creature lunged at me with surprising speed, its claws slashing through the air. I barely managed to dodge, rolling to the side and coming up in a defensive stance. It circled me, its eyes locking onto mine, searching for an opening. Our fight was fierce and brutal. It swiped at me with its claws, tearing through the fabric of my shirt and leaving shallow cuts on my arm. I countered with quick, precise strikes from my knife, aiming for its joints and vital areas. Each time I landed a blow, the creature let out a pained hiss, but didn't back down. At one point, it managed to knock me off balance, sending me sprawling to the ground. It loomed over me, ready to deliver a fatal blow, but I kicked out hard, connecting with its knee and causing it to stagger. I scrambled to my feet, adrenaline coursing through my veins. Realizing brute force alone wouldn't be enough, I decided to use my surroundings to my advantage. I maneuvered closer to the tree it had emerged from, using the trunks and branches to limit its movements. The creature snarled in frustration, its attacks becoming more erratic as it struggled to navigate the dense undergrowth. Finally, I saw my opening. The creature lunged at me again, and I sidestepped, driving my knife deep into its side. It let out a horrible, keening wail, its body convulsing. With a final, desperate effort, I twisted the knife and shoved it away from me. The creature staggered back, collapsing against the tree from which it had came. It thrashed around for a moment longer, then it went still, its glowing eyes dimming. I stood over it, breathing heavily, blood dripping from the various cuts and scrapes I had sustained. The fight had been tough, but I came out on top. I retrieved my knife and wiped it clean on the grass, glancing around to make sure there were no more surprises lurking in the shadows. The tree had returned to its normal state, the fissure closing up as if it had never been there. I took a moment to catch my breath, the adrenaline slowly ebbing away. This encounter had been a stark reminder that not all creatures out here were harmless or amusing. Some were dangerous, and I would need to stay vigilant. As I gathered my tools that were scattered and headed back to the cabin, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of satisfaction. Life out here was unpredictable and challenging, but it was never dull. And for someone like me, who had seen and done so much in the military, that was just the way I liked it. Family. Thank you for listening in to another Can I Knife Creepypasta. I hope y'all enjoyed this one. This one I really had fun doing. And there's more to come. And it's all original, so yeah, it's whatever I come up with. With that being said, have a good night. Sleep well, if you can.